What's up, strength coaches? Welcome back to another episode of the Cheeky Midweeky, where we are making strength and conditioning not boring anymore. And we do that by highlighting the practitioners that make this the best field in the world. Today, we have two guests that have worked together, and they are not both strength coaches. We are minding the gap, and we are working athletic trainers, strength and conditioning coaches, and we're going to have more of these multiple guest episodes coming on. Steven, Eric, thank you for coming on, fellas. There's a lot of other things you could be doing right now, so thank you for allowing us to learn from you right now.
Appreciate you having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
All right, so Eric, you've been on the show before. Let's go ahead and just dive right into it. What made working with Steven, because when I reached out to you about it, I was like, hey, what's like one of the best relationships athletic training wise that you've had? And you were like, hey, we gotta do this. What made it so special and stood out for you in your head?
Well, I've been fortunate to, in my 10 years almost now, that I've had really good relationships with athletic trainers. And I think a lot of that has been just the proximity of weight room being next to the training room. But there's always been like kind of one, I think, that with all my teams that I've, connected with better and had, just a tight relationship. And Steven was that guy. When I came in, he had got there just maybe a few months prior. I think in August of 2021, I started in December. So he had been kind of going with the team with men's basketball at GW. I came in, I'd never worked men's basketball directly. I've been around it, but it was never my team. And so he really, helped me on board to get the lay of the land with the coaching staff, with the guys. And so that made that really smooth. Coming in we hadn't had a strength coach for like over a month. The guys hadn't lifted much. I think for Steven in particular, he understands the game, but he also understands movement. He has a CSCS, and not that that's the end all be all of strength conditioning, but it gives him that frame of reference or that lens. We talk a lot about our lenses of what we see things through, and he has that kind of. He's also very good at basketball. I'm very athletic, so I'll pump him up a little bit.
Hold on, Steven, you hoop it up, bro?
I love it. I love playing. But I can't say I'm all great. I'm super average.
You did have the highest vert on the plyo mat, though.
Did I really? I didn't know that.
I think so, which probably says more about my ability as a strength coach.
But the effort of the guys, maybe, I don't know. We don't know about it.
Yeah. No, but I think just too, we could speak the same language and kind of go back and forth between athletic trainer language and strength coach language. And then also we really just talked a lot about the sport. Like, hey, what are you seeing on the court with the guys that these guys need? What do I see from a strength conditioning perspective? But there was just a continuity, which made it really easy.
How about for you, Steven?
Yeah. Well, I appreciate all the things you said, Eric. It was awesome working with him. I think he's one of the smartest people that I've ever worked with in terms of strength and conditioning coaches. And he was kind of the first guy that wasn't all, let's just get stronger, bigger, faster, right? It was more science-based, a lot more research-based, and a lot of more data that we sifted through and tried to collect together. And so those things were super helpful, and I learned a lot from him, which I appreciated a lot. And also just that spirit of collaboration and the willingness to work together just with an open mind. And he would ask me often, hey, like, what can I do better? What are we missing? What are things that we aren't thinking about, like as a unit, right? Not just him and not just me, but kind of as a sports performance unit. What can we do? And we're constantly checking ourselves and trying to get better. And that was something that I appreciated about him. And it made the relationship really easy to work with, and ultimately benefited the athletes at the end of the day, right? Which is the whole goal.
Eric, how did you have that kind of mindset as a strength coach? Because I feel like a lot of times strength coaches are known for not thinking that way, just to be blunt.
I've never had that mindset. I don't know. Like anti strength coach. So like, and that's how I want us. That's how I want us to be seen, because I think there is so much more potential to than just being weight room guys or just being meatheads. So maybe my background as a punter, or as not a typical athlete, maybe gives me that outside perspective where I can still be on, be an athlete, but then see kind of some of those other gaps. I mean, it's definitely an evolution, I think, right? Like evolving from, if you look at the programs that I was doing my first few years, it was probably very weight room centric and percentage based, and let's get their squats, their cleans, their benches up. But then you just kind of have light bulb moments. So that was kind of the evolution from an assistant to director, and even prior to that of integrating more of that data. Training is testing, testing is training, and trying to make it more of an iterative process. And so like Steven was probably the benefit of that. And I think it's growth mindset and just being open and willing to challenge yourself and look openly at what you're doing.
I feel like we were both trying to just get better. I was trying to learn from him. He was trying to learn from me. How can we get our guys better? What things are we testing and not testing? Like, should we be doing, we're always like asking questions. And I think that was a big part. Like, we were kind of both curious people, right? Wanting to learn more, and never really thought we had it all down and were experts at anything, but both of us just were open-minded and was kind of like craving knowledge, just trying to get better.
All right. So Eric, you talked about evolving, like, I'll prompt this and then you guys keep going, but you are now in a position where you're overseeing strength coaches, right? You obviously still run teams, but like, how do you then take this example and then try to guide other coaches to do the same exact thing? Because we want our listeners to be able to, I brought you guys on because I want people to copy what you guys have and our listeners can apply it.
Yeah, I think it's like the benefit that we had in how we were set up in the 2 seasons we worked together is, I was men's director, but I worked directly with men's basketball. And so those positions, our men's and women's basketball positions, are very embedded in that they're at every practice and they travel. And so we had a lot of time together. So that's like, I think to me is the biggest opportunity, is we had all that time on the road, at practice. We could, I'm walking around looking at different things. I usually stand by Steven and we just talk about whatever, if what we're seeing, but then just other stuff too. Right. So it's just time. I think we had that baked in. And so it's the challenge for me as director is trying to help our staff that maybe don't have that, baked in terms of their positions, like our GAs and our other assistants that don't work with men's and women's basketball. How can we get them more time with each other or with athletic trainers, and make sure they're in alignment that way?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think I call them informal interactions, right? We don't need to set a Wednesday 3 p.m. meeting every week to sit down and talk about what just happened all week, right? It doesn't have to be a formal thing every time. I think the informal interactions, stopping by the office and saying good morning, chatting about whatever, right? Sitting at practice together, talking about what we're seeing on the floor, all those informal interactions, I think add up to even bigger benefits than having weekly meetings sometimes. We just talk about everything that's going through our minds in that moment, the things that we're seeing in real time, and how can we, be better and discuss those things just in passing, right? A couple minutes at a time. Those informal interactions were so valuable to me, and I think it helped our relationships a lot. So I 100% agree with what Eric said. And I think the other part of it is ask questions, man. Like, just be curious and like want to know more. I think we just asked each other questions, not only things like, how can I get better? Eric, what do you think I can be better at? It's, why do you do these movements in the weight room? Or you said this to the guys the other day. Why did you, what was the thought process behind that? Just things like that, where be curious and try to learn more about the other profession and the other respect. Right. And so I think both parties do that. You can only get better, right? Having that open mind and kind of putting that ego aside, right?
And okay, so I love the notion because that's at least what Kyle and I did at Towson, and I think Kyle and I will do an episode like this for all of our listeners out there. How do you then handle the duality of, okay, you're always having constant communication? Do you then also still need to have those formal meetings like you did say? And again, Eric, put the administrative hat on and the strength coach hat on. Like, how do you handle that duality?
Yeah, as an administrator, I do, like, our policy is, hey, meet weekly with the athletic trainer, but then you should talk informally, like Stephen mentioned, daily. Like, if trying to get those informal interactions, or even if it's just a text message. Like an example, I work with lacrosse now, and they practice in the morning. Our lift is after, so I'm not in it always in at the beginning of practice, unless we're doing speed or conditioning work at the on field work at the beginning. So then I text Dice K, our athletic trainer, with them, like, on my way in, like, hey, any updates for lift today? But the challenge with that is he's over at the Vern, and I'm coming from home, or I'm coming from the Smith Center. So our multiple facilities, I don't have as much of that informal interaction. So that's what I'm trying to chase. But then for our other athletic trainers, like, what's nice at our main facility, Smith Center, is the athletic training room's just down the hall. And so, like, people pop in all the time, and that's what we try to encourage with them as well. Like, you should check in. Obviously, if you have a lift, check in on the specifics for any modifications, any limitations. But then you can also just go in. I always go in to heat my lunch in there, because then that's like, we have Stephen, I actually have an office now. First time ever.
Nice. I love that for you.
Yeah, my first desk at UIC was on the weight room floor. It's like, I explained it like, this would be like an assistant basketball coach having their desk on the basketball court. Like, this is like, there's a barbell right here. But yeah, finally, little baby step upgrades. But and there's a microwave in that little kitchenette area. But then I go into the training room because I want those to be able to say hi to them and see how they're doing, what they're doing in there. So just opportunities like that. Try to encourage.
And there's like a lot of times when I'll go lift in the weight room. I'll work out most days, and I'll come in there. We'll lift together sometimes, like, not planned out, but like, we would just have that time together. And sometimes the coaches would come in and lift as well. Like, those interactions are super important. Sometimes you get more thoughts, genuine thoughts, from a coach when they're lifting with you, when you guys are doing something else together, versus like, hey, let's sit down Tuesday at 2 p.m. and talk about this one thing. Like, I feel like there's a certain quality, I don't really know what it is, but a more relaxed environment when head coach comes in and he's lifting and we're lifting, and we're just asking some questions and trying to chop it up a little bit. I think that's super helpful.
That's a great point. Oh, keep going.
I was going to say, that's something that we did. I think that helped me see Steven's process of what he was doing for his training. We could talk about that. He would ask me questions and vice versa. But I think that's something, reflecting back, because we had a coaching transition between our first and second year, and both Steve and I stayed on. And that's something I would have did better. And there's a lot of factors to it in terms of life and time, and like doing director and men's basketball strength coach. I would have trained with coach more, or the coaches more, and encouraged that. I did some, but I think I would have did that more because of that benefit that Steven said. Is like, it's disarming, or it's just a different environment, and you get to. I would invest more in that now. Handy does a great job with that. Like, he'll train the basketball staff. They'll often come in as a staff, which is great, and we try to encourage that with our staff members.
Hearing you say that makes me think about, like, Benetti puts it on X all the time, right? Mm-hmm. Like, they I think it's mainly only on the road, but like, at the very least, like, they're doing that, and they have that staff engagement, and that just goes to things that we've talked about here on Strength Coach Network, or like you just said, eating your meals together. Like, you're going to spend time with each other. You might as well start to know more about them. Like, oh, hey, Eric just moved and got a new house, like, and his son can go play at the lake. Like, if the athletic trainer knows that and can relate to that, you're going to have a better relationship working together.
For sure.
You need CEUs to remain certified. At Strength Coach Network, both of our long form education courses, Fundamentals 1 and Fundamentals 2, both have 2.0 CEUs to the NSCA in Category C. When you complete the learning and you complete the learning check, you will earn your 2.0 CEUs. That is 33% of the CEUs you need in a 3-year reporting period. Click the link down below to learn more about both courses. If you're looking to train your athletes in person or remote, you need to make sure that you're utilizing TeamBuildr. I have had TeamBuildr since 2019 and still utilize it with my remote athletes. This makes everything simple, from the ability to program, have videos right there, wellness questionnaires. Loved being able to have it in person at the rack at Towson, and being able to have it in person now at Goldfinch. This has made my life easier as a coach. If you're still printing on paper, I don't know what you're doing. If you have a different software company, again, I don't know what you're doing. Check out TeamBuildr down in the link below. Are you expanding and need more equipment inside your current room? Or are you building a new weight room and you need to get some equipment? You need to look no further than Powerlift. I had Powerlift equipment when I was at Harvard, Iowa, and at the University of Maryland. I'm currently utilizing their stuff right now. I'm telling you, Powerlift strong, Powerlift made here in America, here in the great state of Iowa, made, manufactured. You have the ability for customization, whether it's on the bench, whether it's on the upholstery, whether it's on the bumpers, across the rack. There are countless options, making sure it's designed to your specific brand. It's Powerlift made, it's Powerlift strong, it's not cheap like all the other competitors, and the people inside of Powerlift are people that you want to be with. Check them out in the link down below. What would be a piece of advice to strength coaches? Because that's mainly our audience. We obviously have athletic trainers and physical therapists and nutritionists that listen, but our key audience is strength coaches. What would be your piece of advice to them on how to best interact with their athletic trainers? Because we're going to stereotype and we're going to say that the strength coach is usually the one that's like, oh, we got to do more. And the strength coach will say that the athletic trainer is soft, and then the typical athletic trainer will say that the head strength coach is an idiot that just wants to lift more weight. And if that's no longer the world that we live in, tell me that I'm wrong. But if that's the world and we're trying to change it for the better, how can strength coaches best interact with their athletic trainers to have what you guys have?
Yeah, I've been blessed to not have to deal with strength coaches like that in my career, right? So I've had multiple strength coaches that I've been with in different programs. I've really enjoyed my relationships with each one of them. They're all different, right? They're not all the same, but I've never had like just a meathead type of like my way is the highway, hoorah type of guy. They've always been open to new ideas and new thoughts. So I've been blessed with that. So I don't have too much experience to speak on those specific situations. But I would say, um, man, just to be able to put your ego aside and have an attitude of understanding, right? We all think what we do is great, right? And it's beneficial. But I think the minute we start thinking that our way is the only way, I think we get in a little bit of trouble. I think if we get into an attitude of just understanding why you disagree, I think disagreement is fine. I think it's great sometimes. I think the product of disagreement is a better product sometimes, is better, right? So I think to have an attitude of understanding, and if you think we should go a different route, help me understand why, and let me help you understand why I think the way I think. And I think if that type of attitude and collaboration exists, I just think the product is so much greater than the strength coach doing his thing his way and the athletic trainer doing a separate thing his way. Right? I think just having that mindset and attitude, just to be able to, hey, let me understand, let me learn and grow from this new relationship and this new opportunity, I think pays dividends down the road like tenfold.
How about you, Eric?
Yeah, I think that open-mindedness and like collaborative approach and like just being hungry for knowledge and improvement is like foundational. That and that's like what we had. So that's what we're trying to chase with all of our relationships.
I want to throw this out to you guys. What do you guys think about roles and adding, like, okay, the rehab coordinator within, like, is it a bridge position between the weight room and the athletic trainer, or is that even necessary if athletic trainers and strength and conditioning coaches are just doing a really good job being good ATs and good strength coaches? Like, do you need that person, or do you just need better conversations and better relationships?
I think it depends how you're set up, how many teams, what's your logistics of your facilities, and like how deep you can get with each team. I've been thinking about that more and more lately because we've had, since Stevens left, we've added another position, basically a me of athletic training. So there's a director of sports medicine, and so
Oh,
now our structure is my boss, Chris Hennelly, who was Stevens' boss directly when he was here. He's above both Yewa and I, and we're the directors of our areas, and so we kind of all collaborate in that way. And she has a team she works with directly, and then I have my couple of teams that we oversee our staffs, and so we're finally building kind of that out. But I've been thinking a lot more about that kind of how we can bridge that gap, or we call it common ground, build that common ground across our teams.
Steven, how about you? What do you think?
Yeah, I think I'm kind of more on the side of you might not need a separate position and role for that. I feel like, and that's just in my experience, right? I'm the men's basketball athletic trainer. There's usually a men's basketball strength coach. I'm I act as the rehab coordinator. The primary rehab guy, right? And if I do a good job, and if the strength coach does a good job of meeting each other in the middle across that sports performance spectrum, right? Then it covers everything, right? So who's to say a calf raise is a rehab exercise versus a strength training exercise,
Yeah.
right?
Amen.
It's all based on the dose, the setting, the context of it. But if we can fill in those gaps and bridge that gap within the relationship between me, the strength coach, and the athlete, and what he does on the floor, I don't know if you need another voice to interfere with that. I feel like continuity wise, it might be even be better with less voices, and just us talking about it.
I personally, I would agree with you with that, because it's like, hey, the fewer cooks in the kitchen. Like, hey, Eric, you're great at
Right.
what you do. Steven, you're great at what you do. Like, all right, come together and make it work. You know what I mean? Like,
Mm-hmm.
and be symbiotic that way.
Yep.
Yeah, I think yeah, maybe like a football team where there's that many, a wide diversity of
That's a good point.
positions and it's a large organization. So maybe that's an opportunity for a whole school, kind of a hybrid athletic trainer, strength and conditioning role that would help coordinate that. But if we're doing our jobs well and creating the structure to facilitate the conversations and the planning and the working together, then I don't, especially in the case of basketball, where it is, you have a staff, you have the two positions, and you're so embedded. I don't think it's would be necessary for a third person to be in there.
With respecting the privacy of the individual, I'm not asking you to say who it was and what they did, but what was like the most fun rehab that you guys had, like working together, working through a problem? Because like for Kyle and I, it was our Achilles rupture that we worked together.
Mm.
But like, what was yours? And then I want you to each to there's no way to be like, hey, all right, you say what yours is, you say what to see if it's the same thing, but like discuss what it potentially was, and then I'd love to hear from each of you and your perspective as to why you picked that.
Yeah. I have for sure a guy that comes in mind. It was a partial patellar tendon tear, right? History of patellar tendonitis, tendinopathies, whatever, and an overuse issue at the end of the day, right? And I think the rehab, we shut him down for a long time, about 10 weeks of no basketball, right? Just to bring him back. It was the summertime, so we had
Yeah.
time and we weren't playing games, and so let's really take advantage of this time to get him healthy. That's a lot of rehab in 10 weeks. If you do rehab every day, right, and treatment that's a lot. And so I had planned out the big chunks of it, what I'm going to do, and kind of talked about it with Eric. And as we got through this rehab week by week, eventually Eric was like, man, we could do some of this stuff in the weight room. let me take some of this off your plate. Can we sled drag? Can we do some of these heavy pushes? Can we substitute some of these exercises, these rehab exercises for stuff upstairs on the court? Or can we start testing him? Can we sprint him now, jump him, things like that? And so because of that relationship, I don't know about fun. Like it was a good rehab journey, right? Because we were both trying to be so good to the athlete, and it made us more creative in our rehab and in our training and programming. It ultimately benefited the athlete at the end of the day, but we were just bouncing ideas off of each other because it was such a long time, 10 weeks, 10 plus weeks, right? How can we solve these problems that we're running into? How can we keep getting better? And so I don't know if we could have planned it any better. I don't know if it's even possible to plan out something that lengthy, but as we got going and kind of on the fly, man, it was great. It was a great thing that we did together. Athlete came out of that healthy, and I think I loved the process of going through that.
How about you, Eric?
I think, yeah, well, I'm glad you said that because, yeah, it was an exercise in learning, I think, for us, because we were able to I ended up buying the jumper's knee protocol from Jake Tura. We kind of use that as a framework, like to build off that, because it was the case of like elite male jumper, patellar tendinopathy. It's like, I don't know if it was Jill Cook that was like, only really good jumpers get this, and that this guy was a really good jumper. And so we were able to kind of blend, because it was a long-term case. It was really a case of like, I think too, coming in, it kind of started maybe even before they got back in the summer. And then like individual workouts. So it was a new coaching staff, a big man basically is dunking for an hour, 45 minutes. They're like, oh, it's not as an individual workout, it's not that hard. But then we're like, oh, you just did like 50 dunks and it's day one. So it's like
in 20 minutes, right? Super dense.
Very dense. Yeah. So helping us build that language of like volume, intensity, density, understanding what they're actually doing, and like individual workouts helped me better prepare the guys for what does individual look like? What does team workout look like? I think it was in the fall, Stephen, that we realized that like we weren't using GPS or any tracking. We did session RPEs, so like duration times RPE for the guys, and I would track that on a dashboard. And we were thinking, going back and forth, how much should we limit him in terms of like sport practice? All right, let's go. All right, normal trainings, they were pretty efficient with their time. Like 90 minutes was a normal practice, I would say, not like the death marches sometimes you have in sport practice. So they're pretty good about it, but like fairly intense. And day one, Steven was like, all right, 30 minutes. That's like a third of the practice. He could do whatever. And then we were timing just stopwatch activity, like very crude. He got like 10 minutes in that practice. So then Steven had to do like 20 minutes of extensive plyos and movement just to get him up to that level. And so that kind of started us down like, oh, what is an actual full practice?
What's full go?
Like?
What does full go mean for an athlete? Right? It's not 120 minutes. It's not even close. Like full go of real activity, stopwatch each rep, right? You'll get, I don't know, maybe 30 minutes, right? I think the average, average would be like 20 minutes in season. Man, each player will probably be on the court doing something for 20 minutes for a full practice. And that was eye-opening for us. That's full go.
That's super cool to hear you guys talk about with the stopwatch. Like, could you dive into that more? I mean, I just wrote a note here of like, want to talk more about that at all? Or are you guys like, no, I mean,
because it started because towards the end of the last few weeks of his rehab, we wanted him to get exposed to the sport, but we can't release him full go. And so we had to progress. We wanted to increase his workload 15% per week-ish, 15-20% per week. And so how do we do that? Okay, let's calculate court time, right? But we can't it's different from like the practice plan accounts for 120 minutes or 100 minutes or whatever. We can't just divvy that up. It has to be per rep, right? If it's a group workout and there's 3 other bigs with him, 1 rep takes 2 seconds, and then he's sitting for a long time until he gets that next rep, right? Every drill is like that. And so we had to really be meticulous about how much work is he really doing in a practice.
Yeah, that's was like eye-opening in terms of like, oh, it's not saying it's not hard or there's not intense actions or like the demands, the time on feet, but it's like we're doing a lot less than you might think, at least from the naked eye. So actually putting a little bit of data to it was like, oh, that's actually pretty cool to see. What does this look like? And then how can we best progress them back in?
How has these rehab cases that you guys worked with together made you better coaches and athletic trainers with the rest of your population that, let's say, that are not returning from injury? So, your regular quote unquote athletes, Eric, and the athletes, not the patients that you would have, Stephen.
Well, I think
Sorry, one more time.
What's the, like, how did these rehab situations where you got really in the weeds, how did that then help you become a better practitioner for everybody else that wasn't, needing to return to play, like just the normal athlete that you worked with?
I think for me, it was just how like thinking more about the sport and what are the actual demands. Like we said about like what's a full practice is like 20 to 30 minutes of activity, and it's like better preparing them for that. Understanding that like loading, in this case with a tendinopathy, loading is important, and the gradual improve, the not having spikes in load. I think that applies across everyone, especially in the college environment when you go from 8 to 20 hours is not set up for success for anyone. And so trying to blend that and best prepare them for that. From my side, that's in terms of global loading. That's the biggest thing I think about.
Yeah, I think about just the total workload as well. It changed the way I look at the guys that play in games, right? 35, 38, 40 minutes a night. James Bishop was a 40-minute guy every night. Like that, if you think about what a normal athlete does in a full practice, you might get 20 minutes of activity, but on then game days, you're getting 40 minutes of activity, right? That's real time because the time is stopping and going, right? So that's 40 minutes true activity. Like that is insane, right? So how do we train in such a way to prepare them for that, right? If they're only getting X amount in practice, and then if they're post-surgery or coming back from an injury, long-term things that we're modifying, for me, from the rehab perspective, I have to have a goal. At some point, you have to be established as full go. So what exit criteria do I need to have? How many minutes should you be able to go and practice pain-free for me to deem you full go? Is it 40 minutes? Maybe not. Is it 20? So you have to play with that. And that really helped me really in all my rehabs and thinking about workload in general.
Hearing you guys talk about GPS and data made me now think about a conversation I had with Amit back at Towson, where, I mean, at least it was like 800 was like the norm, and would just, because of all of the change in direction and the IMAs. Eric, for you now working with lacrosse, like, what are some of the biggest things that you've seen differences within the GPSs from the different sports? And then what would be your piece of advice, recommendation to our listeners that do work with all the different sports?
I think it's understanding the culture of the sport. We don't have GPS with lacrosse at this point. Our only teams that have it, women's basketball has Connexon, and our men's soccer has Titan. But is understanding the culture of the sport. What are the general demands, and then what are the specific demands? So for my approach and with lacrosse is like, you have attack, defense, and middies. The middies run more, and I've got some data that Scott Kuhn shared with me from his time with lacrosse. And I would say from my approach is like, I treat them mostly general in terms of our conditioning running. because I think the specific conditioning will come through practice, or should come through practice, in terms of that. The differences in, all right, if you're doing full field drills, rides and clears, the middies will get that more running in there. I shouldn't necessarily run them more if they're already going to be running more in practice. But I think just, understanding the external workloads. I was talking with Scylla, our women's basketball strength coach, about it a little bit yesterday. Is like, are we tracking the pregame warm up and like making sure that's optimized? Because I know I share, like, at Iowa with football, we could have told Doyle that the warm up was too much. They wouldn't have changed. But then I don't know if you were there, Justin, but when they got GPS, they were like, oh, we're doing a half's worth of work in the warm up. And Mike Daniels would have told you that. Like, he's gassed running across those running across. It's like, man, I would do the warm up and go sit down as a punter, because I didn't have to be warm at that point. I'd already done like 2 other dynamic warm ups with Frazier or whoever. So, and I saw the same thing at UIC with women's soccer. We had some tracking units, and we ended up cutting down our pregame warm up. So it's just trying to be more efficient with the reality of what you see, and then your perception to
that. One of the things, like, you have a great point about the warm up, and like, I mean, this is what I was going to say. Basketball, it seems like there's so many different, like, there's a shoot around, and then there's this, and then there's that. Like, how do you navigate that? Like, what's your piece of advice of navigating for that, for anybody that might be the first time ever working in basketball? Like, how do they work around it? Because for me, I would just be like, Coach, why are we doing this much? Like, holy cow, what's going on?
Well, I'll take that first, because I was an outsider to basketball. I played basketball growing up through high school, but in terms of the college level, it's definitely different in terms of the level of preparation and the organization and professionalism of it. But yeah, to me, there's different ways to do it, and different shoot arounds are more intense, less intense, more of a walkthrough, and it depends time of the year, I think, too, and how the coaches approach it. Getting back to the stopwatch aspect, one time I did the same after we had this kind of realization of practice not being as dense as we thought it might be. I tracked one of the guys in warm up, and like, I think we would get out on the court, Steven and I would do a dynamic from 75 to maybe 69, 68 before the game. And then the coaches would take over for their different drills. And from 68 or 69 to 0, there was 9 minutes of activity. Like, of reps with the ball, or defense. Not much defense pregame, but there's also, though, I think there's something to be said for the skill and the feel component of basketball, of like very rhythm and technical aspect. And so you need to get your shots, you need to like build the skill. So it's kind of a balance of that. Like, whatever makes the guys feel good for game, I think is what you need.
Yeah, I think of it like a primer, right? In strength and conditioning, Eric taught me what that meant, a primer lift, like game day lift or the day before. You prime the nervous system, right? So it's not really a ton of global load on the body, but it's just for the nervous system to wake up, get your reps up in the morning for shoot around. It shouldn't be fatiguing that much, get the blood flowing through the body, and kind of get the nervous system ready to play, right? Same thing for the pregame warm up. I think 75 minutes is a little excessive. That's a whole individual workout. Sometimes for my rehab return to play, hey, if he needs an individual, just do the warm up for this game day and then you'll be good, right? That's plenty of work and reps, right? And I think those things, yes, it might be a little long, but I don't think, especially with the adrenaline pumping and everything, I don't know how much fatigue is being set in. To me, I see it more of a nervous system issue, or not an issue, a nervous system primer, just to get you ready to play.
We've been kind of riding this basketball wave, and we're going to keep going with it in this conversation. What are some major do's and don'ts for our basketball audience that you guys would both recommend? Looking to expand your education further, but you don't want to pay the massive fees of going back to school? At Strength Coach Network, we have 2 long form education courses that both cost less than one course taught to you by an online school. If you click down below to learn more about Fundamentals 1 or Fundamentals 2, you will be able to sign up for our education course that has over 20 hours of educational content brought to you by some of the biggest names in the field: Dr. Brian Mann, Zach Daycant, Jeff Moyer, Terrence Kennel, and many more inside of this course, all for less than the price of one course at a college university. Hawkin Dynamic is the best option if you're trying to get any force plate data or if you're trying to collect any isometric mid-thigh pulls. Not only can you do isometric mid-thigh pulls for the lower body, but I call it an isometric mid-thigh pull for your upper body, where you're able to do an isometric push-up into something where your back is pushing into a bar and your hands are on the force plate. I utilized Hawkins force plates and Hawkins software when I was at Towson. Still utilize it now when I'm at Goldfinch. If you're using the other competitors, I don't know what you're doing. Hawkins customer service is second to none. Hawkins software and their hardware, again, second to none. Check them out in the link down below. Are you or your athletes waking up too hot or too cold in the middle of the night? Or are you looking for a sleep tracker option that doesn't involve wearing a ring or a wrist or a watch, something on your body? Then you need to look no further than the company SleepMe. SleepMe makes chili pads, which keep your bed cold or warm depending on what you want. And they also have a tracker that will go underneath that pad, so it will be able to tell how well you slept. When I did a little study on myself with the Oura Ring and with the SleepMe tracker, they were within 97% of each other, and it was actually pretty astonishing how similar the two were. I love my chili pad. It makes me sleep great. I sleep cold. I actually wake up cold now. I haven't woke up warm. And pretty much ever since I've had it, I don't like sleeping on the road because I don't have the ability to use my chili pad. Bunch of former colleagues back at Towson got it. My stepmother got it. Check it out in the link down below.
I think from a rehab perspective, one of the big don'ts for me is I'm not really putting a lot of extensive plyos in my rehab, right? Ankle sprain, return to play, lower extremity, things like that. I'm not really having you jump around doing a lot of rope skips or line jumps or ace skips, karaoke, things like that as part of the return. I'd rather see you go through a non-contact workout in practice for 20 minutes that day as part of that late stage rehab, right? I think you get so much extensive work in basketball, just part of the game. It's hard for me to justify seeing us do some of that in the weight room or in the training room.
I was going to disagree with you, Stephen, on that. I think now, if it's the same type, I think there's ways you can complement with plyometrics, and this is maybe an evolution since I've worked with basketball in terms of like, I've been using Matt McInnes-Watson's kind of tier system of like light, deep, medium, and ping tier, and then obviously there's all the different vectors. So I think if you can complement it with different skills of it, maybe it's more hopping, maybe it's more deeper ranges. So I think maybe it's not truly plyometric. It's like some of the stuff we did with like slant boards and DC blocks, where it's very low volume, but it's still working on the skill of the foot contacts, or maybe put them in different positions, or very high intensity but very low volume in terms of maybe it's if they're ready for a depth or needed a depth jump or drop jump, something like that. So I think it can be done. Maybe it doesn't need to be done. And the concept I think about this is like, is the sport developing or just expressing those movements? Which is, I think, I don't know. I think it might develop to some degree because there is so much. I think the data I saw from, or I've heard from the Raptors when they got, I don't know if it was from Connexon or just the Sport View, their tracking systems, and the NBA is like 70% of basketball is sideways or backwards. It's like, do you train those muscles or those movements in that way? So that was kind of eye-opening. It's like, probably not. Most weight room stuff is forward or, and I do a lot of speed-based stuff. It's like, ooh, maybe I don't need to do as much acceleration work or, just straight up and down work. Can it be more multi-directional, especially in the off season when they may not be doing as much of that specific work?
I think it's like filling buckets. We talked about filling buckets a lot, right? There's all these buckets to fill. The sport fills these 2-3 buckets very densely, right? What are the things that we're missing, right? Linear, like, do we need linear speed? Like, isn't basketball a lot more curvilinear at the very least, coming off pin downs and going through those actions, lateral, going backwards? Like, how do we fill all those other buckets? And even when you talk about those plyos with the slant boards, and can we put them in positions that they aren't really exposed to in the game? I think, I don't know, maybe that helps sport performance, but at the very least, it helps the athlete as a human being, right? Just to be able to move in these positions and get into these positions that they're not used to, right? If you impose one type of load to the muscles, tendons, and bones for the whole season, they don't get exposed to these other loads. How healthy is that athlete, right?
Here's a question about. Oh, go ahead, Eric. Sorry.
I was going to say, building off Steven's point is like, exposing them to a wide variety of movements, ranges of motions, contraction types, I think is important from that health and resiliency aspect. A couple of the other concepts I would think about with basketball was, I think for Mike Robertson, was always be like a step ahead. And that in terms of like, if they're going to do more individuals on the court, I need to prep them for that in that phase before, like get them ready for that jumping and that like kind of in that level of load. But then like, all right, they're doing individuals. Now I can do more agility work in our work and Steve and my work to prep them for team practice. Like we did think a lot about that kind of perception action preparation, especially if it was a return to play, but then also from the team standpoint. And then the other thing, talked with Jay DeMeo a lot, is like, how can we better prepare them for the preparation? So it wasn't even necessarily specific to the game, but it's like, how can they practice better and longer?
Within this basketball world, I feel like shoes, ankle, footwear, it's talked about a lot, and maybe it was just mainly talked a lot at Towson. What are your guys' thoughts on high ankle shoes, low ankle shoes, taping, not taping, bracing? Like what are your opinions and what are they based on?
I think before any of that, to put armor on the ankle through, you can call it corrective exercise or rehab or stability work, just general health, I think those things pay far more dividends than a high ankle shoe or any type of tape I can throw on there. I think if we can strengthen your toes, the bottom of your feet, and your ankles, even stability from the knee and hip, that all kind of connects. If we can coordinate that together and be strong and stable in those positions that we need them to, I think all the other stuff, I don't know how much it matters. And maybe that's blasphemous for me to say, but that might be the 1% that makes a difference with shoes and tape. I think some of these other things that we can do with minimal equipment and just our bodies, I think, and are the priority for me.
Aren't you the ankle taping guy? Isn't that what
I know. That's what I'm saying. Maybe it's blasphemous for me to say that type of stuff, but man, I stand by it.
No, we're in alignment with that. Is like, how can we get the structure stronger naturally, to then they don't need that. And I don't know, Stephen, for you, there'd be guys that would still tape for games or for practice,
for sure.
But we tried to
that was different
not
for someone
discourage
who's
it,
off
but
of it.
if they needed it, but yeah.
Right, but for someone coming off of an ankle sprain that needs to come back, for sure. Like we got to put some extra stability on there. But in my mind, the goal is for us to be able to play in our most natural athletic form with nothing extra on there, right? And so we can get them strong and reinforce those tissues there and enhance the proprioceptive concepts there. I think those are far more important than extra tape.
Because we talk about the joint by joint approach, or like if you add stability at one joint, the force has to go somewhere. So it's like, is it the knee? Is it the hip? Is it the back that's going to take it? So just like if you were back squatting or box squatting and you restrict the knee travel forward or vertical shins, the load's got to go somewhere. to do the movement. So, and maybe that's, like you said, you got to tape the ankle to play in the game. You got to perform.
Right.
But long term, you're trying to balance that long term and short term performance.
And there's custom orthotics for plantar fascia issues, for the feet. Like, I'm not saying those things don't have value. Like, by no means am I saying that. But I think that can't be our end all be all, that the one answer to all our problems. It has to be, like, if it was that easy of a fix to just throw something on there, then it wouldn't really be that big of a problem then. I think we have to address the underlying issues of the tissue defects that are in there that aren't as strong as they should be, or compensations that we need to address. Like, those things are the priority. And then on top of that, hey, if we need a little extra, let's do a little extra.
How about addressing nutrition for basketball? Because with just how much it gets played and all the activity and all the work that does get done there, what have been some kind of key principles that you have found within the locations that you have, and some practical advice for our coaches?
I'll say that's an area we probably could have did better in. We were trying to do your best. I'm not definitely not a nutrition expert. I would say since we brought Handy on, he's done a great job with that with the guys. We're able to use DEXA 3 to 4 times a year with our kinesiology, our exercise science lab, and we've continued that. And that's helped with the not just accountability, and like our head coach is comes from a place where that in Miami, where the nutrition or the body composition and being in good shape is a priority. And so that is a big piece. Also, across our department, our athletic director has pumped more funds into each team specifically for nutrition, non-travel, not specifically for travel or for game day, but so that has helped as well, because you can talk about it all you want, but if you don't put the money behind it to help the teams, it doesn't matter. You're like, also we've like, even, I don't know if they were even done. They kind of started when you were there, Stephen, but this last year is the first time we've had full dining halls on campus. They had kind of been more of a commercial model, and so we've actually got dining halls now. So trying to build that out with the athletes of like. So in the case of basketball, it might be as simple as like they send me or send the strength coach a picture of their food, and then we talk about it. The last summer they did a lot of hydration. They did some hydration testing, which was cool, and helped for that education piece for the guys to make sure they were staying hydrated during the hot summer months.
Yeah, I think
anything for you yet, Stephen? Go ahead.
Yeah, nutrition wise, like, I'm not super versed on that side either. My priority is to keep them well fueled right after practice, get them enough protein, enough carbs, and then especially just because our season is during the winter months, to do what we can to reinforce the immune system, right? So we want the multivitamin pumps and vitamin D and those things are helpful. Put them in the smoothies for their post-game shakes or whatever, right? Those things are helpful. I know with me and Eric, we had a lot of chair bundies, right? Things to supplement our guys. But I think it's hard because at the end of the day, you can't control 100% of what the guys eat, right? We can provide them the post-game, post-practice meals, give them the supplements and their shakes. But what's stopping them from at midnight to going out for a quick Mickey D's run, because they're hungry, right? Or getting a slice of pizza or fried chicken at night, whatever it is, like, how you're not going to monitor it. There's no way to control that. And so at a certain point, you want to do your best to educate the guys and to provide them with everything they need. But then it is what it is at that point, right?
Yeah, no, you have to shape behavior, and that's one of the hardest parts about being a coach. And it's never a simple process, but as you continue to evolve and work together, you start to find those sweet spots, and that's stuff that Amit and K-Bay would do too, in terms of the cherry bundy and getting them food pre and post, and just trying to have as much flexibility as possible and surround it by them, so that way they're thinking about it more and they have the ability to make the right decision, because you've at least, put the food in front of them, especially
Right.
with any of your return to play athletes, right?
Right, for sure. I think that's the big thing too with all the injuries, especially soft tissue, a muscle strain, things like that. Um, that's one of the quickest ways I can get buy-in from my athletes to eat well is, hey, it's going to help you recover better, right? Even if you're just sore or like, if you're not really have a objective injury, right? Like it's going to help you recover. I think sleep and nutrition are always going to be the kings of recovery there. And so I think if you educate the athletes and talk about those things with them, that's one of the quickest ways they can, oh shoot, maybe I should start thinking about it a little bit more. And I think that's helped a lot.
What would be, we want to obviously respect each of your days because you guys are still, in the trenches working with athletes. What would be kind of a closing statement, closing summary piece that you would say, like, we've had this scheduled for a little bit of time now, but something you're like, I really wanted to say X and we hadn't brought it up yet. Like, is there something burning on your heart that you want to get out and let everybody know?
Well, I'd say from one thing we didn't talk too much about is the initiative we started was called Common Ground, and Stephen kind of led that. I helped him a little bit with it, but it was that was the joint meetings between athletic training and strength and conditioning. And our boss Chris Henley had kind of tasked Stephen with leading it, and we used probably biweekly, maybe it depended time of the year, and how frequently we met. We tried to go biweekly. And when Steve and I were sitting down to plan it after the first season and introducing it, we're like, all right, let's start with the ground up. Let's start with the foot and ankle. And then each session will talk on a different joint. And like, all right, what are the common injuries we see across our sports? What are the common ways we can strength train them, rehab them, and then maybe do a case study? We ended up spending 4 sessions on the foot and ankle and just like really
There's so many
out.
thoughts and so much conversation.
It really sparked some really great stuff for our staffs, and we've continued it on this year as well after Stephen left. So like we did like I think 18 of them while we were together, and we foot and ankle, then we went knee and then hip and back, shoulder, wrist, elbow, like literally went joint by joint and, went through that kind of template. And it was just really beneficial for us. We call it common ground, but it's like that common language and like understanding, hey, what you're doing in the training room and what you're doing in the weight room, like Stephen mentioned earlier, is kind of on a continuum. It's not that much different. It's just lower level versus higher, maybe higher level in terms of that spectrum.
I think it was great because prior to me and Eric getting to GW, I think it was a culture of, hey, the athletic trainers do their thing, strength staff will kind of do their thing, and it's a little bit more separated that way. I think these common ground meetings were a great touch point and I don't know what you call it, just an opportunity to interact with one another, right? Whatever we're talking about, right? But just to have another interaction, a little bit more formal, so that at the very least, you can talk to your strength coach or you can talk to your athletic trainer, right? And it's all kind of based upon, can we meet each other on this sports performance spectrum, right? Because it's not divided. Whether however much we want to believe it is that you do your thing and I do my thing, it's not that way. It's all one spectrum, because a calf raise can be strength training or rehab, right? A jump can be strength training or rehab. It's all one and the same, how you dose it and in what context it's in. And so these common ground meetings really helped us, I feel like, talk about where those lines blend and how we can interact with that blending to benefit the athlete.
And Eric, you've said that this initiative has continued to grow. Where do you see it in the next 1, 3, 5 years? And Stephen, is this something that you do at Drexel or that you'll be implementing in the next 1, 3, 5 years?
I think for us, we've continued it. I almost wonder if we need to cycle back through like the joint by joint approach, because we've touched on, this fall, we talked about RED, so like relative energy deficiency in sport. The last couple I've led more on like periodization and planning from more of a strength and conditioning side. because Jordan Shepard, who's our gymnastics athletic trainer, and I work closely with. She's taken it over from Steven. So we just talk about what do we need, but I almost wonder if we need to cycle back, because like we have new people come in, we have new GAs, we have new assistants, same thing on the athletic training side, right? There's turnover all the time. There's always change is the only constant. And so it's like we probably need to go back to the foot, the ankle, and go back through these things that we've talked about. So it'll continue to grow and evolve. And the biggest thing is, or the biggest challenge I say, is scheduling for us, is like getting a common time for, you have we have 7 in strength conditioning. I think athletic training is like 14, 15 maybe. So that's a lot of people with a lot of different schedules, different times a year. So that's the biggest thing, is trying to find the common times that we can get the most people there. Cause it's not always, we record them and send them out, and with notes and stuff too. But, that's the biggest challenge for us.
Yeah, we're not currently doing anything formal like that here at Drexel. Maybe one day we'll get to it. I just finished up my first season with them. And so my priority was just to create the relationships between me and the strength coach, the other athletic trainers, the guys, the coaches. So kind of maybe selfishly, but on my part, try to create and develop these relationships on my own, just within my first season with the team, right? And so to be able to do that. But I think there's always room to build and grow your relationships within the department between strength coaches and athletic trainers, right? So any opportunities that we have to do that, I think, is of utmost importance. I always tell people who want to get into athletic training or are curious about the profession, is it hard, easy, what is it like? I think it'll always boil down to relationships, right? I think that's always the number one, before the things the skills that you were taught, how good you are and versed you are in the sport. I think the ability for you to cultivate and build genuine relationships with your strength coach, with your players, with your coach, is of utmost importance. Because if you don't show your players that you care about them, they don't care what you have to say. And so the first and foremost is you have to build that rapport, trust, and relationship with them. And I think that was one of the biggest benefits that me and Eric had and were able to do. And I think really everyone benefited from that, because we were able to work together so well.
I think that's a great place to end it, because that's exactly why we had you guys on the show, was to talk about the importance of relationships. It doesn't matter if it's with your AT, your nutritionist, your sports scientists, athletes. We work with humans. We don't work with, somebody that does tape. We don't work with barbells and dumbbells, right? We work with humans, and the quicker all of us can learn that and understand that, the better we will make this field. And that's what we're here to do. We're here to make athletes' lives better. So hopefully everybody got a ton out of this. I got a ton of notes. Eric, Steven, thank you very much for taking time out of your day before your day starts to share with us.
Appreciate you having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us. Steven's a rock star and a rising. He's a stud. So he's big time.
I could say the same for Eric, man. I appreciate it.
Congratulations on making it to the end of the video. Why don't you celebrate by watching more videos just like it? You can also help us on our quest to placate the algorithm gods by liking, sharing, subscribing, and commenting. Thank you.